6 men stood beneath the chandelier in my ex-husband's Mafia mansion, and every single one of them was looking at me like they were waiting for an order. Not from him, from me. I still had a cleaning rag twisted around one hand. A silver bucket sat beside my feet. My sleeves were rolled past my elbows, and there was probably dust in my hair from spending half the morning polishing a staircase I used to walk down wearing evening gowns. Across the marble foyer, Shin Kyung-ho stared at me, my ex-husband, one of the most feared Korean mafia bosses in the city, and the man who had brought me back into his mansion as household staff because he thought humiliation would finally teach me what betrayal cost. His jaw tightened. What is happening? Nobody answered him. Then Ahn Do-hyung, the head of Kyung-ho's security detail, stepped directly in front of me. In 3 years of marriage, I had never once seen that man bow to anyone except Kyung-ho. But that afternoon, he bent at the waist. Toward me. Your instruction, boss? The room went silent. Kyung-ho's face changed. Not anger at first. Shock. The kind that comes when the world you thought you controlled suddenly reveals that something important has been happening underneath your feet. I looked down at the rag in my hand, then back at the men waiting for me. Kyung-ho had spent a month reminding everyone that I was his disgraced ex-wife. His mother had spent even longer reminding me that I was an outsider. Yet his most loyal men were standing inside his own Mafia mansion waiting for me to tell them what happened next. He thought he knew how powerless I was. What he didn't know was why the men he trusted most had never truly believed I betrayed him. And he was about to discover that the woman he'd punished for treason had once protected his entire family without ever asking him for credit. But that wasn't where our story began. It began with love. Real love. Which is exactly why everything that came afterward hurt as much as it did. My name is Camille Delacroix. Before I became the woman scrubbing the Shin family's floors, I owned a small restoration company specializing in buildings everyone else had decided were too damaged to save. Old homes, historic properties, fire-damaged interiors, beautiful things people had stopped believing could ever become beautiful again. Maybe that should have warned me about the kind of man I would eventually marry. I met Shin Kyung-ho when his family hired my company to restore a century-old townhouse they had allowed to deteriorate for almost 10 years. The first time I saw him, he was standing alone in the ruined parlor wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my first car. He barely spoke. He just watched me inspect the cracked ceiling, warped floors and rotten staircase. Finally, I gave him my estimate. It was expensive enough that most clients would have started bargaining before I finished the sentence. Kyung-ho didn't blink. Can you save it? Yes! Then do it properly. That was all. No flirting, no smile, no attempt to impress me. Yet something about the quiet authority in his voice stayed with me. I didn't know then that the reserved Korean businessman watching me measure broken floorboards was also the heir to a powerful mafia family. I didn't know that men lowered their voices when he entered rooms, or that security cars followed him from a distance, or that his family controlled legitimate businesses sitting on top of a much older network built from loyalty, fear, and secrets. I only knew that every Tuesday afternoon he somehow found a reason to visit the restoration site. At first, he inspected the work. Then he started bringing coffee. Then dinner. Then one rainy evening, after everyone else had gone home, he found me standing beneath a leaking section of roof with a bucket in my hands. He removed his expensive coat, held it over my head, and walked me to my car in the rain. "You know, that's a terrible use of $1,000 coat," I told him. "It was already mine." "And? You weren't?" I stopped walking. That was the first time I realized the quiet man had been courting me. Kyung-ho rarely said beautiful things. He simply behaved as if losing me would inconvenience the laws of nature. For 18 months, he showed up. Then he asked me to marry him. His mother objected immediately. Madame Hyo Sunshin didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She looked at me the way wealthy people sometimes look at a stain on expensive fabric. I wasn't Korean. I wasn't from an influential family. I wasn't born into their world. I was a black American woman who had entered through the front door carrying blueprints and somehow convinced her only son that love mattered more than bloodline. To Madame Shin, that made me dangerous. But Kyung-ho chose me anyway. We married on the terrace of the same townhouse I'd restored. 40 guests. String lights, soft rain threatening the edges of the evening. And the moment I remember most wasn't the ring. It was Kyung-ho lifting my veil and whispering where nobody else could hear. Marrying you is the first decision I've ever made entirely for myself. For 3 years, I believed that sentence. I believed whatever darkness surrounded the Shin family, our marriage existed somewhere outside it. I was wrong. If stories about underestimated women turning humiliation into power are why you're here, subscribe, because the moment that destroyed our marriage began with something that looked completely innocent. An invoice. 3 years into our marriage, someone inside the Shin organization began leaking private shipment information to the Yom family, one of their oldest rivals. The leak was serious. 2 men were nearly killed. Business contracts vanished. Warehouses were compromised. Everyone became suspicious of everyone. Around the same time, I was reviewing old invoices connected to the townhouse renovation when I noticed a payment that shouldn't have existed. Wrong vendor, wrong date, wrong authorization code. Most people would have ignored it. Restoration taught me to notice what doesn't belong. Ahn Do-hyung didn't ignore me when I brought it to him. Ahn had run Shin security longer than Kyung-ho had been old enough to understand what the family really was. He was disciplined, quiet, and fiercely loyal. I asked him one question. Could this payment be connected to the leak? His expression changed. That night, he asked me to tell nobody, not even my husband, especially not until we knew whether an innocent man was about to be accused. So I agreed. For 6 weeks, Ahn and I investigated quietly. We met wherever nobody would notice. The garden shed, the household supply room. Once in the laundry room after midnight, I found patterns inside invoices. Ahn traced movements inside security. Together, we identified the actual traitor. A senior guard. Someone Kyung-ho trusted. Ahn handled the rest. I asked for nothing. Not recognition. Not gratitude. Not even for Kyung-ho to know. I thought protecting my husband was enough. A year later, those secret meetings destroyed my marriage. I came downstairs one Sunday morning expecting breakfast. Kyung-ho was waiting at the kitchen table. There was a folder in front of him. 4 photographs slid across the table. Me leaving the garden shed. Ahn leaving minutes later. Another photograph outside the service corridor. Another from the estate driveway. Explain them. I stared at the photographs. I couldn't. Not without exposing the investigation Ahn had promised would remain sealed, because naming the former traitor could still put people at risk. I need you to trust me. Kyung-ho's eyes hardened. My mother has photographs. I know what they look like. She also has bank transfers from your company to an account connected to the Yom family. That stopped me. What? He pushed another page toward me. The transfers were there. My company name, my account numbers, my signature reproduced at the bottom. Fake. Every piece of it. Kyung-ho, I didn't authorize this. Then explain Ahn. I can't. Not yet. His expression almost broke. Almost. You're asking me to ignore everything in front of me. I'm asking my husband to believe me long enough to let me prove it. How long? 7 days. He stared at me. I still remember thinking he was about to say yes. Instead, his mother's voice came from the doorway. How much more evidence does a man need before love becomes stupidity? Kyung-ho looked at her, then at me, and chose, not me. Leave. 1 word. 3 years of marriage ended inside it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at the man who had once told me marrying me was the first decision he'd made for himself, and realized that when the moment came to choose me without certainty, he had gone right back to letting his family decide who deserved his trust. Camille? No. He stopped. If you're ending our marriage without giving me 7 days to defend myself, don't soften it now. The divorce was completed quietly. The Shin family liked silence. A confidentiality agreement made sure the public never knew why the Korean Mafia boss's black wife disappeared from his side. I walked away with my restoration company, my maiden name, and one promise. I would never again need another person's belief in order to know who I was. For 2 years, I rebuilt my life. My younger brother Julian started college. My father kept his small building supply company alive through a difficult market. My business grew slowly. I stopped checking the financial pages for photographs of Kyung-ho. Mostly, And I told myself the Shin family belonged to another lifetime. Then my father called me one afternoon. His voice sounded wrong. His company had defaulted on a business loan, a loan he had taken months earlier to keep 30 employees on payroll. What he hadn't known was that the debt had eventually been purchased by a shell company controlled by the Shin family. The final collection notice carried Kyung-ho's authorization. My father had days before losing everything. I went to see Kyung-ho. For the first time in 2 years, he was waiting in his office when I arrived. Black suit, black shirt, that same unreadable face. But the second I walked in, something moved in his eyes, then disappeared. "You look well," he said. "Don't." His mouth tightened. I placed the notice on his desk. "My father's debt. I know. Then cancel it. I can't erase legitimate debt because you asked." I laughed once. "You managed to erase a marriage pretty quickly." That landed. He looked away, for half a second, then back. "There is another option." That should have warned me. My father's debt would be considered paid if I worked at the Shin estate. Not as a consultant, not restoring anything. Household staff, under his mother's supervision. "For how long?" "Until the debt is satisfied. Meaning until you decide I've been punished enough." His silence answered me. I stood. "You still hate me that much?" Something flashed behind his eyes. "No, that was worse. Because men don't invent punishments for women they feel nothing for." I accepted anyway. Not because Kyung-ho had power over me. Because my father had 30 employees. Because Julian still had tuition. Because pride is expensive when people you love are standing behind it. Tell me something in the comments. If taking that deal saved your father's business but meant working inside your ex-husband's mansion, would you do it? I arrived at the Shin estate 3 mornings later. Madam Shin met me in the foyer. She looked almost pleased. "You'll begin in the West Wing." She handed me an apron. Not a uniform, an apron. That detail somehow made the humiliation worse because I was still wearing my own clothes underneath it. I tied it around my waist. "Floors first," she said. "My son wants the house perfect before the quarterly council meeting." I looked at the marble stretching beneath the chandelier. The same floor I'd crossed as Kyung-ho's wife. "I've cleaned worse things than marble." Her eyes narrowed. The first week was designed to break me. I polished silver, scrubbed floors, carried linens. Madam Shin assigned tasks that made certain I crossed paths with people who remembered exactly who I used to be. But the moment that bothered me most wasn't hers. It was Kyung-ho's. On my 4th morning, I was kneeling beside the staircase, removing old wax from the marble when his shoes appeared in front of me. I kept working. He didn't move. Finally, I looked up. His eyes weren't on my face. They were on my hands. The skin across my knuckles was cracked from cleaning chemicals. He frowned. "Where are your gloves?" I almost laughed. "Is this a workplace inspection?" "Camille, your mother said gloves leave streaks." His head turned toward the hallway. I knew that look. Someone was about to have a bad morning. "Don't!" He looked back. "What?" "Don't rescue me from a punishment you approved." His face went still. "I didn't tell her to injure you. You only brought me here to humiliate me." "Good to know there are boundaries." I went back to scrubbing. He remained there several seconds longer, then walked away. The next morning, industrial-grade protective gloves appeared beside my bucket. No note. I left them untouched. By lunch, they had disappeared. That night, a different pair appeared. My size. I used them. I hated myself a little for noticing that he remembered. The tension only grew. Kyung-ho started coming home earlier. He told everyone it was because of security concerns. I noticed he always seemed to pass through whichever room I was cleaning. Sometimes he said nothing. Sometimes our eyes met. Sometimes I caught him staring at the space where my wedding ring used to be. And every single time, I remembered what loving him had cost me. Madam Shin noticed too, so she raised the humiliation. 3 days later, she hosted a private dinner. 12 guests. People who had once attended my anniversary parties. People who had toasted our marriage. She assigned me to serve them. When I entered carrying the first tray, conversation died. Madam Shin smiled. "You remember Camille? We brought her back to help with the house." The help. One woman looked embarrassed. An older councilman lowered his eyes. Madam Shin enjoyed every second. I poured wine, served dinner, cleared plates. My hands never shook. Then the front doors opened. Kyung-ho had come home early. He entered the dining room and stopped. His eyes found me immediately. Apron, serving tray. His former place beside him now occupied by an empty chair. Madam Shin continued eating. "You're early." Kyung-ho didn't answer. He looked around the table, then at me. "Why is Camille serving dinner?" "Because Camille works here." The room went silent. His jaw tightened. "Everyone leave." His mother stared at him. "Excuse me?" "The dinner is finished." Within minutes, 12 wealthy guests were collecting coats. Madam Shin waited until the door closed. "Have you forgotten why she's here?" "No." "Then stop looking at her like you're still married." That silence told me more than either of them intended. I set down the tray. "Don't fight over me. I'm not a chair." Kyung-ho looked at me. "Camille, you wanted punishment. She gave you punishment. The only difference is you don't enjoy watching it as much as you thought you would." I walked away before he could answer. That night, there was a knock on the door of the small staff room I'd been assigned. Kyung-ho stood outside. "I never asked her to do that. You gave her authority over me." "I know." "Then live with what you authorized." His eyes dropped. "I'm trying." "No, you're regretting. Those are different things." I closed the door. For the first time since returning, I slept well. Something changed after that. Not in me, in him. Kyung-ho stopped treating my presence like a punishment he could control. He began watching, noticing, questioning, especially where Ahn was concerned. Ahn never treated me like staff. He held doors, made younger guards apologize if they spoke disrespectfully, left good towels beside my cleaning supplies. One afternoon, Kyung-ho saw him carry a heavy bucket away from me. His expression went cold. "Ahn!" The older man stopped. "Yes, sir. Why are you carrying that?" Ahn glanced at me. "Because it was heavy. I have staff for that." Ahn's expression didn't change. "So does she." For once, Kyung-ho had no answer. I almost smiled. Later that afternoon, he cornered me near the conservatory. "What exactly is between you and Ahn?" I stared at him. "You had 2 years to ask that question." "Camille." "No, you don't get jealous now. Jealousy belongs to men who trusted their wives while they had them." I walked past him. He didn't follow. But that night, I saw him standing alone on the terrace where we'd gotten married. And for the first time, I wondered whether bringing me back had been less about punishment than Kyung-ho refusing to admit he had never learned how to let me go. 10 days into my stay, I found the first proof. Madam Shin sent me to dust the private records room, a room I once had a key to. On the 3rd shelf sat a ledger. My father's company name was inside, dated nearly a year before his default. I stopped breathing. The Shin Shell Company had been tracking his finances long before the loan went bad. This wasn't debt collection. Someone had been waiting, preparing, keeping leverage ready in case it was ever needed. I photographed the page, closed the ledger, put everything back. Then I kept cleaning, because I'd learned something after losing my marriage. Truth is strongest when you don't announce it before you're ready to prove it. 3 weeks after I returned, the estate's security alarms went off. The sound cut through the mansion just after sunset. Not gunfire, not chaos. An alert. Every exterior door locked automatically. Winnie came running from the service corridor. "What's happening?" I heard shouting downstairs. 4 men connected to the Yom family had breached the rear service entrance during a security rotation. The younger guards hesitated. Ahn was already moving toward the foyer. And suddenly, I was looking at the house differently. Not as Kyung-ho's ex-wife. Not as the woman with the mop. As the restoration specialist who had spent years opening walls, studying floor plans, and rebuilding this mansion's oldest sections. I knew passages the security team had never needed to know. "Ahn," he turned. The east stairwell. His eyes sharpened. "What about it? Seal it." "If they came through the service entrance, they'll try to reach the main foyer through that corridor." A younger guard stared at me. "How would you know?" "Because I rebuilt the corridor." Ahn didn't hesitate. He turned to his men. "Do it." Everything happened quickly after that. I moved staff away from the central hall, directed Winnie toward the old wine cellar passage, pointed out the garden exit. The younger guards stopped questioning me. They started listening. Then Ahn came around the corner. There was a cut above his eyebrow. Nothing dramatic, but enough to tell me the breach had been real. "West corridor is secure," he said. "Keep everyone away from the glass entrance until your reinforcement arrives." He nodded, then stopped, looked directly at me, and said it. "Anything else, boss?" The word hit the room. Boss. One guard looked at him, then at me, but nobody laughed. Nobody corrected him, because in that moment, everyone understood what he meant. Not ownership. Trust. 11 minutes later, the estate was secure. Nobody in the household was seriously hurt. The intruders were contained. And when the front doors opened, Kyung-ho walked in with the rest of his security detail. He crossed the foyer fast, then stopped. His men were standing around me. One waiting for instructions, another updating me, Ahn beside me, my cleaning rags still sitting on a table, my apron still tied over my clothes. Kyung-ho looked at Ahn, then at me. "What happened?" Ahn answered. "She kept the household safe." Kyung-ho stared. "You followed her orders?" Ahn didn't blink. I trusted her judgment. Something shifted in Kyung-ho's face. Not jealousy this time. Recognition. Of something he should have understood years earlier. Then Ahn turned back toward me. "Boss?" Kyung-ho went completely still. That's the moment from the beginning. That's the chandelier. That's the bow. That's the second the punishment stopped making sense to everyone except the people who had created it. Kyung-ho looked at me as if he were finally seeing a piece of our marriage that had always been missing. "Why does my head of security call you boss?" I held his stare. "Ask him." Then I walked away. And for once, Kyung-ho followed someone else's instructions. He asked. Ahn told him everything. The invoice. The security leak. Our secret investigation. The senior guard we'd exposed. The meetings in the garden shed. The promise to keep Kyung-ho out of it until the threat was contained. And finally, the reason I couldn't defend myself when those photographs appeared on our kitchen table. Ahn's voice apparently broke when he reached that part. "She was protecting you." Kyung-ho said nothing. "She protected this family," Ahn continued, "and asked for no recognition. When your mother used our meetings to accuse her, I should have spoken. Madam Shin warned the staff that defending Camille would be treated as disloyalty. I obeyed." Kyung-ho's voice was quiet. "And the Yom transfers? Manufactured. The photographs? Real. Their meaning was false." Kyung-ho sat down. Ahn wasn't finished. "The woman you divorced for betraying you was helping me identify the man who actually betrayed you." Then Ahn placed another file on his desk. My father's loan. The ledger entry. The Shell Corporation. The dates. Everything. "This wasn't collection," Ahn said. "Your mother arranged for the debt to be acquired months before the default. She wanted leverage over Camille's family." That was when Kyung-ho finally understood. His mother hadn't simply destroyed our marriage. She had kept a leash attached to my family afterward in case I ever became a problem again. Kyung-ho found her in her private sitting room. The confrontation spread through that house by morning. He placed the photographs on her table. Then the forged transfers. Then the loan records. "Tell me you didn't do this!" Madam Shin looked at the evidence. Then at her son. "I protected you. You destroyed my marriage. Your marriage was weakening this family. She was protecting the family. She was an outsider. She was my wife." Madam Shin's face hardened. "And that was your mistake." Kyung-ho stared at her. "What did she ever do to you? She made you choose." That sentence finally exposed everything. Madam Shin hadn't hated me because I was disloyal. She hated me because loving me proved Kyung-ho could belong to someone besides her family. "Would you do it again?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Kyung-ho walked out. I didn't know any of this yet. I was folding laundry when he found me. He stood in the doorway for so long I eventually looked up. Something was different. The arrogance was gone. So was the anger. He looked like a man who had spent 2 years punishing the wrong person and had only just understood that no apology in the world could return what he'd taken. Ahn told me. I folded another shirt. "Okay, everything." My hands stopped. The leak. The meetings. My mother. Your father's debt. I looked at him. His voice dropped. "You were protecting me. I was protecting people who didn't deserve to die because one man wanted money, and I divorced you for it. You divorced me because you trusted evidence more than your wife." He flinched. "Good. Some truths should hurt. I believed her over you. Yes. I gave you no chance to defend yourself. Yes. I brought you back into this house and punished you for a betrayal you never committed. Yes. His eyes filled with something I'd never seen there before. Shame. I'm sorry, Camille. I put down the shirt. Sorry is the beginning, Kyung-ho, not the payment. I know. No, listen to me. Sorry doesn't give me back 2 years. It doesn't erase being served divorce papers by the man I loved because his mother handed him a folder. It doesn't erase me carrying trays past people who attended my wedding. It doesn't erase you watching me scrub floors before you finally became uncomfortable with the punishment you approved. His jaw tightened, but he didn't defend himself. That mattered. I don't expect you to forgive me. Good. I want to fix what I can. You can't fix me. I know. Then don't try, he nodded. What can I do? I looked straight at him. Become the kind of man who would never do this to me again, whether I come back to you or not. That was the first real thing I asked of him. And this time, Kyung-ho listened. The next morning, my father's debt disappeared, not quietly. Kyung-ho documented that the loan had been improperly acquired through a family shell company and returned every payment my father had made after the acquisition. He didn't present it as a gift. He presented it as restitution. Then he convened the Shin family council, and in front of the same powerful men who had once accepted the story that I betrayed him, Kyung-ho admitted exactly what happened. My ex-wife was falsely accused. Nobody moved. She was loyal to this family when members of this family were not loyal to her. Madam Shin sat at the far end of the table. Her face never changed. Kyung-ho continued. I believed manufactured evidence because it was easier than admitting my mother might be capable of deceiving me. Camille paid the price for my failure. Not my mother's failure. Mine. That distinction mattered. He didn't hide behind her. The council investigated. Madam Shin lost her seat on the family's legitimate business board after the shell company scheme was confirmed. Several financial controls she had quietly dominated were transferred away from her. When she left the council room, she passed me in the hallway. For once, she didn't call me an outsider. She didn't call me anything. She simply walked past. I expected victory to feel louder. It didn't. Sometimes emotional justice is simply watching the person who worked so hard to make you small discover that you survived without becoming cruel enough to resemble them. I prepared to leave the estate that afternoon. The debt was gone. The arrangement was over. Kyung-ho found me carrying my suitcase toward the entrance. His eyes fell to it. You're leaving. That was the deal. I know. He looked like he wanted to say something else. He didn't. Good. Old Kyung-ho would have told me to stay. This version stepped aside and opened the door. Goodbye, Camille. I stopped. Goodbye, Kyung-ho. Then Ahn stepped forward. He bowed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Boss! I shook my head. You know I'm not your boss. His mouth almost smiled. Respectfully, that's not why we call you that. I carried that sentence with me all the way home. Kyung-ho didn't chase my car, didn't send flowers the following morning, didn't buy jewelry, didn't use money to force himself back into my life. He did something harder. He changed his behavior when nobody was promising him a reward. 3 weeks later, my restoration company bid for a major preservation contract connected to one of the Shin family's legitimate hotels. I almost withdrew when I saw the name. Then the council informed me Kyung-ho had formally recused himself from the selection process. My company won anyway. Best proposal. Best history. Best price. No favor. When I arrived at the first project meeting, Kyung-ho wasn't in the room. That meant more to me than if he'd been waiting with roses. A month later, my father called. Kyung-ho had visited his company. Not to apologize with money, to apologize with words, man to man, for allowing his business to be used against our family. My father didn't forgive him that day. Kyung-ho didn't ask him to. 2 months later, I found an envelope at my office. Inside was a copy of the confidentiality agreement from our divorce, stamped void. A handwritten note sat beneath it. You should never have been forced to carry my mistake in silence. No request, no invitation, no call me, just accountability. 3 months after I walked out of the mansion, I saw him again at the restored townhouse where we'd first met. My company had been hired to repair storm damage. I was standing in the same parlor where he'd once asked whether I could save the building. Kyung-ho stopped in the doorway. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked up at the repaired ceiling. Still saving things everyone else gives up on? Buildings are easier. I deserve that. Yes. That almost made him smile. Almost. He didn't ask for me back. He asked if I would have coffee with him. I said no. 2 weeks later, he asked again. I said no again. Another month passed. He didn't punish me for rejecting him. Didn't disappear either. He simply kept becoming consistent. When I finally said yes to coffee, it wasn't because I'd forgotten. It was because for the first time since our divorce, I wasn't being asked to trust words. I had months of evidence. We started over slowly. Not husband and wife, not mafia boss and former wife, Kyung-ho and Camille. Two people sitting across from each other trying to decide whether love could survive after trust had been murdered and rebuilt from the foundation. He told me things he'd never told me during our marriage. How much his mother's approval had controlled him. How choosing me had frightened him more than he'd admitted. How, after the divorce, he'd spent 2 years convincing himself anger was easier than accepting he had let me walk away. I bought your father's debt because I wanted a reason to see you again, he confessed one evening. I stared at him. What? The shell company was already tracking it because of my mother. I authorized the final acquisition when it defaulted. Why? His expression tightened. Because I knew if I called you, you wouldn't come, so you trapped me. Yes, that's not romantic, Kyung-ho. I know. That's controlling. I know. And you let your hurt justify it. Yes, I appreciated that he didn't dress obsession up as love. He owned the ugly parts too. If you ever do anything like that again, I told him, there won't be another conversation. There won't be. Months passed. He kept showing up. Not perfectly. But honestly, the Shin staff still called me boss whenever my restoration work brought me onto family properties. At first it was Ahn, then the younger guards, then even the house staff. The name became a joke and then stopped being a joke. Because people weren't calling me boss because I married a powerful man. They were calling me boss because when that mansion was in chaos, I had known what to do. Because I'd protected men who had once failed to protect me. Because authority doesn't always belong to whoever has the largest office. Sometimes it belongs to the person everyone instinctively trusts when the room catches fire. 6 months after the council hearing, the Shin family's legitimate property division offered my company a long-term preservation partnership. Not employment. Partnership. My name remained on my own door. My company remained mine. Kyung-ho had no authority over it. That was important to me. A year after I left the mansion with that suitcase, he asked me to meet him on the terrace of the old townhouse. It was raining lightly, just like the night he'd once destroyed an expensive coat walking me to my car. No guards nearby, no counsel, no mother, no audience. He stood across from me holding a small box, but he didn't open it. I loved you badly, he said. I said nothing. I thought loving you gave me the right to expect loyalty without giving you trust. Then when I lost you, I confused wanting you back with having the right to pull you back. Rain collected along his hairline. I know better now. He finally opened the box. The ring wasn't my old one. That marriage was gone. This was something new. I'm not asking you to return to the woman you were, he said. I'm asking whether the woman you became might choose the man I'm still trying to become. I looked at him for a long time. Then I thought about the marble foyer, the bucket, the apron, Ahn bowing, Madam Shin's face, my father's debt. Every moment someone else had tried to define my worth for me, and every month Kyung-ho had spent learning that loving a strong woman didn't mean controlling her. It meant being strong enough to stand beside her without needing her to become smaller. I said yes, not because he regretted losing me. Regret is easy. I said yes because he changed after I made it clear I might never return. That's how I knew the change belonged to him, not to his fear. Today, my restoration company handles properties across 3 states. The Shin Preservation Partnership is only one part of what I've built. And every time I walk into that mansion, somebody from security eventually says it. Morning, boss. Kyung-ho pretends to hate it. He doesn't. Sometimes he'll look at Ahn and say, You realize I'm still technically your employer. And Ahn will answer with the same expression every time. Of course, sir. Then he'll turn toward me. Boss! I laugh now. Because there was a time that word shocked me. There was a time I thought power meant having enough money that nobody could force you onto your knees. I know better. Power is knowing that even when somebody puts you there, they haven't decided who you are. A queen can wear an apron. She is still a queen. Some people will hand a strong black woman a mop and think they've reduced her to the floor beneath their shoes. Some people will mistake silence for weakness. Some will confuse humiliation with defeat. And some men won't understand the value of the woman beside them until the entire room begins treating her with the respect they failed to give her themselves. Kyung-ho thought bringing his ex-wife back into his Mafia mansion would teach me my place. Instead, it taught him mine. And if you've stayed with Camille this far, subscribe for more stories of betrayal, powerful love, Korean Mafia romance, emotional justice, and women who refuse to disappear when someone else decides they're finished. And tell me one thing before you go. Could you have forgiven Kyung-ho after everything he did, or would you have walked through those mansion gates and never looked back? Because he thought I needed his permission to become powerful. He was wrong. His men understood it before he did. Now he does too.